Hello, friends. Here you have today is seeing the simplicity more so in quote unquote astrology, end quote. Astrology could just be looked at casually and simply as some type of mystical coding to astronomy. Astronomy appears to have evidence to identify objects in the sky that have their own solidified densities and temperaments and their own energy signatures. And within that, they have their own orbital arrangements and motions and patterns around different types of epicenters, all of them being their own epicenters to different temperaments throughout the skies of the quote unquote Vedic cosmological map, end quote. So what a sextile could be, and I'm just intuitively kind of spewing it and like juicing it out. But what a sextile could be, maybe we could look at the sextiles as something of like a wavelength or casually, there's a oscillation pattern, and within that oscillation pattern, that which goes up and then down and then up, that nearby up and that nearby down and down, that's the sextile. So there's like kind of like they're on the same wavelength, they're on like a same rim board, scientifically speaking. So within like that whole phenomena of things, the different sextiles that because we're looking at astrology as something as a different clock, whether we're realizing that simplicity or not. And within that simplicity, there's self-established energy signatures of a constellation, self-established energy signatures within a house or a planet, them being, similar but different. And within that constellation, there's a self-establishment of how we're going through that within our own individual spaceship and the collective material spaceship. We're going through that to like receive and kind of see the codings of that astronomy and astrology of what that codings has to offer us. And what that codings has to offer us is like the self-established sextiles. They're we're just seeing it as a clock. I'm looking at astrology as a clock, just to bring it to some ground here, because obviously like people could have their own bias against astrology, not necessarily understanding it, and them just having their own bias and their disdain for certain things in general. And those certain things on a subconscious level could align to different things with astrology, correlating to astrology. And then we could have a disdain and a bias towards certain names and planets and energies without us even realizing it on a subconscious level, because we don't have the surface level critical thinking, surface level intelligence for us to actually unfold and unenvelop, what astrology casually already is, and what astrology casually already is. It's something as a clock, it's a clock. Certain objects on the physical realm that have self solidified from a different spiritual realm, and that's a different thing. It has made a clock for us physical human inhabitants, vessels, for us to experience this physical clock within the astronomy and the astrology. We're in some type of clock, and within this physical clock, we're just kind of like going. It has different mechanisms, and we're just kind of quote unquote going through the treadmill of the physical astrology. And as we're going through the physical astrology treadmill, it's a labyrinth that we have. Like, things are kind of set up, but they're also not, because different things could happen by chance and randomness and like just unexpectation, and who knows like what really governs that, truly. But that's a different thing. So just looking at astrology as a clock, like, okay, these objects are in this, but that's just the physical channel though. The astrology, like, these objects are in this constellation, and those objects, the celestial planets, the celestial object planets being in this constellation, it's something within the physical realm. It's something as a fixed clock, it's a fixed clock, and everything is like kind of mutable, and like everything that is like sourcing energy, that's something of like a cardinal nature. So it's like within this astrology, looking at it as a clock, you know, and like kind of brushing up our own bias and disdain towards astrology. Like the ancients, our ancestors, the predecessors have been using it, you know. It doesn't matter what race you are, like they've been using this system and they've been updating their intelligence to see how it's something of a clock. And for some reason, the clock is somehow fixed, you know, it's fixed within its orbital, you know, rhythms, and what celestial objects, you know, are in what place and at what time, and how that is and what that's doing, and how that is what that's doing. That's just the physical representation of how that's the physical agreements. That was the original physical, like quote unquote oath, end quote, the original spiritual oath for like these celestial objects to take their processions to agree and to compile this celestial clock, quote unquote microastrology, end quote, which we're experiencing here, the humans on Earth. And the humans on Earth we're experiencing this clock, this celestial clock already, astrology being that clock. So like I'm just looking at it within the simplicity of like, okay, it's something of a clock, you know? And since it's something of a clock, that clock is telling us certain things, and that clock is making certain events happen. That clock is like kind of holding the temperament within the firmaments, like around the whole firmament. The whole firmament is being held by the astrology clock and quote unquote all the celestial objects, end quote, within their mechanism, you know, orbital kind of rhythm and pattern, inner lance and outer lance. And like this has been like way before original open source or whatever, meaning like it was already a thing that was doing its own thing. So we could follow up within our intelligence, and we could kind of like budge and nudge. Excuse me, sorry about that. We could budge and nudge out of our intuitive free will, and then the casual mechanisms of the mechanics of like the system of life, where there's quote unquote no free will, end quote. There's no free will because all the other things aside from you, they have their own play and their own like kind of like their own combustion reaction to how we don't have more free will than like the quote unquote universe, end quote, for one example. So within that, we could use but I still believe we have intuitive free will, and we could nudge and budge towards that intuitive free will to see how we can navigate and align with the celestial clock of a quote unquote simplified astrology, end quote. Simplified astrology meaning seeing the simplicity of astrology. It's something of a clock. It has its own mystical codings, and it's just a different parallel reflection to astronomy that's already self-evident, and it has its own energy signatures of the astronomy that is at hand. And the astronomy is just kind of like on the surface level digital tip of how astrology is slightly underneath astronomy. And then obviously they have their own you know, oscillations thereof, because there's always a more pure astronomy inside, and there's always a pure astrology inside, and there's always a less pure astronomy and astrology outside. So it's up to the individual to purify themselves, and using astrology as something, as a tool, a mechanism, and seeing it as a clock for how the clock is doing. It's kind of fixing the mechanisms for everything to be that they are. It's making the labyrinth to be what they are, and we're just riding through that labyrinth, the fixed clock of astrology. And as we're riding through the fixed clock of astrology, we could catch up on game to see like what the clock is doing, right? So the clock is doing like the sextiles, like there's different sextiles. So within the constellations, within the sextiles, that's like a nearby, you could say the sextiles are like, you know, something of an opportunity, right? But there's a particular opportunity. So like there's different sextiles, like, you know, mutable water, fixed earth, and cardinal water, and then mutable earth. And then mutable earth after mutable earth is fixed water. So all the earth and water, they're sextiled up. All the earth and all the fire and wind, they're sextiled up. So all the earths and waters, they're sextiled up, and all the fire and air that are sextiled up. So the fire and air, that's a clue to like the fire and air that makes a particular esoteric opportunity, because the sextiles are saying that sextiles themselves are closely related, kind of like similar patterns on a different esoteric wavelength, measurement spectrum. And within that measurement spectrum, within that peak and however, the esoteric calculations, they're calculating the depths and the heights of different elements and how those elements are creating a certain like unique harmony for like something of a pre-opportunity to happen for the sextile, or for the original sextile to create the pre-opportunity. It was created by some, higher creator that saw that fire and water had to be spaced out in a certain, or fire and air had to be spaced out in a certain way, so it could create like a certain pocket within the cosmic clock, and earth and water had to be created and, configured in a certain way so it could be kind of given rise to a certain like pattern and mechanism within the clock. So like the sextiles, it's like earth and water, that yin opportunity, the yin opportunity of the earth and the water, that's like kind of for us to like slow down and ground down. So all the earth and water sextiles, that's like a feminine opportunity to slow down. And then the masculine sextiles, fire and air, that's like a masculine opportunity to kind of like build yourself up, build yourself up within, receive the knowledge, use the knowledge in proper application, use the purification. So there's two different sextiles. It's the fire and the air sextiles, and the earth and the water sextiles. And obviously, like, mutable water within fixed earth, that's because Mars is in Pisces, and then like a bunch of stuff is happening in Taurus. So that's a feminine sextile opportunity. So we have to process, we have to like see, we have to like take time to integrate and chill and download, because the feminine sextile, Mars in Pisces, that Mars is anchoring us down into some type of like grander world. This some type of Neptunian, Jupiterian crazy, like, because the Pisces constellation, it has a different like, it has a different spectrum within, the 3D to wherever it ultimately goes. And wherever it ultimately goes, it could go probably all of them could go like fairly equally high, but like them having different prominences per their element, So within that, like, we're having a chance to really like Mars and Pisces sextiling Sun, Jupiter, and Uranus and Taurus. We're pretty much seeing like the feminine opportunity for us to get our like, our water, our ancestral genetic bloodline, our water weight, Pisces. We that's what we could be fighting for on a harmonic level, and within that we could receive, like, we could know what to fight for, Mars and Pisces respectively being like in one sense, some type of, esoteric lineage. And then Taurus is like the celestial astrological clock in Taurus is like, it's like, how is Uranus, Jupiter, and the Sun in Taurus right now? And what does that really mean? So how they got there, that physical representation of that, what's really happening in Taurus season is like, it's a redefinition. It's like, this is the start of the redefinition pretty much. And there's been a lot of significant, like, energy markers, if you will, and within those energy markers, because like all of these, like, all these like past events have happened based on how the clock is moving and having significant alignments within a different threshold, within a different threshold, within a different threshold, and it's coming out of this different span. And within that, and it finishing that different span and going to a threshold, these all these celestial objects, they're more prominent, because Uranus could have been more so in the dark 2,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, etc., etc. So for Uranus to be aligned with Jupiter and the Sun, and Uranus to be in a new age where we could be aligning within a whole different age of Uranus, that's like, this is like supreme redefinition right here, is Taurus season, because the Sun is in Taurus. That's like what we're taking action towards, and like how we're like identifying like our own, character growth and whatnot. and seeing how like how that could possibly be exalted, you know. So we could possibly exalt just the Taurus within all of us, right? And as we're exalting the Taurus within all of us, everything's a case by case, because everybody has their own like, purpose, dynamics. As we could exalt the Sun in Taurus, and the Sun in Taurus could like play out differently throughout your chart, and I'll do Taurus through the signs later. That exaltation is conjuncting Jupiter and Uranus, so this is big shit, dude. Like this Taurus season, it's big shit. Because what Uranus is really like low-key saying is like he could be like the navigating force for us to actually go to wherever all these fucking new age messages are even saying that we could go. That forces could be like attributed to like Uranus, and Jupiter being like something of like a ritual planet. Jupiter low-key being like the Olympics and the sports. All of the sports are getting redefined too. Like all of the sports, like the race car peoples, and like all low-key all of them, the archeries, even the jet skis, the snowboarders, and like the BMXers, the skaters, all of them. Like everything is getting redefined because Jupiter is kind of like he's like the president of like Olympus, right? So since Jupiter's the president of Olympus, he's low-key like he's like encouraging all of the like the sports dynamics to be at its own thing, and we're taking action. Sun and Taurus, we're taking action to seeing we're in this like sports dynamic world. Jupiter conjunct Sun, and we're with Uranus bringing us to this whole fucking crazy place. So like Taurus season, this is the start of it all, like this is the precise reset right here, in my humble opinion. And all of that being in the second house of Taurus, we're seeing that, we're kind of like we're being able to see like what we've made. Like Taurus season being a respective feminine sign, we could like see what we've created. We could see how far we've got with the tech, right? We could just like Taurus is about like seeing, observe. Like Taurus is a low-key observer too, it observes how to like, get good work ethic, and then it, executes on its own silent accord. And as it executes on its own silent accord, then it goes parties, and then it does its own thing again, and it sees how, and then it, like within that whole, life is a party. It could also like, keep observing on a feminine level, on like, look at what we have created. Kudos. Give yourself a pat on the back. So I'll just put like the new Sun in Taurus, and like sports dynamics redefined, because like what's going on here, and this is an intuitive thing right here. Let me see. I was going to take a class. I don't know if I have time. I might take a class right now. But yeah, this was an intuitive thing. So like, so the clock is telling us somehow Jupiter, Uranus, and the Sun have landed in this micro Earth level of the micro Taurus constellation. And within the micro Taurus constellation, the Sun is there, and you don't have to get astronomical with it, but you could, So like the Sun, we're kind of like having action towards like this, like we're working for the Empress pretty much. And as we're working for the Empress, what's within the Empress's like kind of land of the Earth to the solar system, Venus, in between the Earth and the feminine solar system is Venus. Within Venus, Jupiter is like kind of like within that like Taurus constellation, that Taurus constellation being exemplifying like, the Earth crafts respectively. And Jupiter being in Taurus, it's kind of like seeing like within that part of the Earth, within that surface level Earth spaceship, Taurus being kind of like the surface level like firmware respectively. Jupiter's there, so like all the sports dynamics, it could get kind of like we got to really be really precise. It could get really polarized into the digital realm, It could get over polarized, as a matter of fact. Jupiter and Taurus, It could get like super polarized with just being too digital, too artificial. Jupiter and Taurus, all like the sports dynamics. Jupiter having like this crazy, the original hype of like human potential. Ernest, the original hype of human potential. Jupiter, the sports dynamics, and the rituals in the Olympic Games. And then the sun, the whole like, the sun that, here, it being its own significant mechanism, energetically, the sun being like something of like its own significant epicenter for the sun's job to kind of like, for it to have a yin and yang relationship to kind of like, power up everything kind of. So it's that sun that like, it's that like inner quality. It's that inner, whatever your savior is, that sun. It's like for you to like, cause like, what is the sun? It's like pretty much a big ass, like, it's like an energetic generator that lets us like, kind of like, we get power off the sun. So within that sun, we're identifying ourselves based on what we're seeing, and we're acting towards that. So within the, we're acting towards this, like, this very advanced, like where we have got to with the tech, because the sun. So we're identifying our place within like the Empress's, like within like Anana's kind of like, within her own evolution. This is like Anana's evolution, right? Anana's evolution. She's been doing her own work behind the scenes, and she has this shit on like, she has her own shit on like her own lock, and we're underestimating these beings, So within that, the sun, Jupiter, and Uranus are in Anana's Taurus constellation, and Anana's Taurus constellation is it's many things. It's not just the digital, but it could be. And within that many things, it's hosting how like, the Olympics are going towards some type of like, or the sports dynamics, they could be going and leaning towards some type of like, technical front or digital front. And hopefully it doesn't get too polarized with it just being too artificial, or too polarized with it being just too much detrimental confusion. That's the things that, see, I simplified the risks. So I went beyond like the intelligence of all these tech companies respectively, because I'm the one like kind of like giving the like the caution, like the logical caution to like how not to be in detriment. So that's why, so I'm gonna end it right there, maybe. So the new, and I like to like repeat here to me, like what I'm saying, like just so I could like kind of know what I'm going to put in the title, like the new sun in Taurus, the redefinition of sports dynamics. So that was just a quick one right there. Let me see. Let me check the time. And the time is so weird, huh? Like sometimes time speeds up, sometimes time slows down. But maybe we feel time based on how we are. We are who we are, and maybe sometimes it's not our time. Maybe it is our time. Maybe it's a little bit of both. But I'll do Taurus through the houses later. I probably did it on my IG like 2 years ago. Excuse me. And yeah, just seeing astrology as a clock, and like kind of like breaking down like, the celestial objects are where they're at based on a different divine plan. And we have an opportunity to adjust to that. Thank you very much.